The new She-Hulk series is missing the mark because instead of focusing on a solid premise, it is trying to be a movie instead. This is Exasperated Nerd Explains. I went into She-Hulk with certain expectations from the marketing and talk around the show, so maybe it's my fault for believing marketing, but I thought it would be a comedic legal show set in the MCU. But the first two episodes feel like the opening of a Marvel movie cut up into chunks instead. Think about what has happened so far. The first episode was almost entirely about how she received her powers, trained with her powers, and was learning to live with her powers, which is usually the opening act of a superhero film. She was almost exclusively alongside Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, which is good in part because I like the Hulk, but feels separate from what I understood the show would be because it barely showed anything in a courtroom and did not really introduce the supporting cast. I also felt like the jokes were kind of weak as well. Don't get me wrong, there are still little jokes and bits in the show in both episodes, some to greater effect than others, but all Marvel movies have those moments. It's part of the reason people like them, but I thought She-Hulk was specifically a comedy which would have interesting heroes and villains with legal issues unique to the universe they created. Much like the Dan Slott She-Hulk comic book run this is clearly based on, which is great, so I expected more from it in terms of comedy and an efficiency in setting the premise. The second episode continues the same trend from the first, taking its time to show the fallout of her hulking out, showing her get fired, trying to find a normal job, introducing her family, before finally receiving a new position from a mean boss character she does not like. At the end, she meets with Abomination and agrees to take on his case for parole, meaning the third episode will be where we get to something I thought would be in the first episode. There is no question Marvel movies have boiled the superhero film down to a formula and to great success, especially for films introducing new characters. There is some leeway, but they generally follow the same path, which has led some viewers to say that they get repetitive. And it looks like this was either imposed on She-Hulk, or the writers used this Marvel movie method as a crutch, or maybe foundation to craft the story, which hurts instead of helps. Traditionally, the first episode of TV shows need to do a lot of heavy lifting because they need to bring the audience back next week, since it is usually something new competing in an ever-expanding market. You have to introduce your main characters, side characters, and establish your premise, all while making it engaging enough for viewers to come back for more within a very limited time frame. It needs to be efficient. I feel like Marvel is taking their dedicated fan base for granted because they are not worried about doing a good job at this. The first episode really only established Jennifer Walters and Bruce, with Bruce likely only being in short cameos for the rest of the series, and the second episode established a little bit more, introducing her new boss, family, co-worker, Abomination, and who knows how the third will play out, but I don't think we're going to get to that episodic point. I feel like we may finally be at the premise, but at this point, I think it's best to abandon any thought that the show will actually be a half-hour comedy set in the MCU. I really think it will continue on the current path. Ongoing arcs for TV shows are great, but you can do it within the confines of an episodic series. However, this is not doing either well, and I think it comes down to the writing. In an interview, the head writer said, "In my original pitch, the Abomination case, was an actual trial and it spanned multiple episodes. In the writer's room, one thing that we all realized very slowly was none of us are that adept at writing, rousing trial scenes." In a show about a superhero lawyer. Bring in more writers and consultants, something. This show is literally superhero lawyer. And the writer admits no one in the room was good at the lawyer part. You know, half of that premise. So yeah, I really did have high hopes for this series and was looking forward to it, but I think it will end up being essentially an okay-ish Marvel movie. Maybe with more side stories thrown in, but not something unique to Marvel or particularly funny. But that's just my opinion. What do you think of She-Hulk so far? Do you think it will reach the premise of a half-hour courtroom comedy at some point? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for watching. Bye.